My name is Anna Kalinskaya. I'm 32 years old now, though the version of me I'm about to tell you about feels like someone from another lifetime. I'm sitting in my apartment on a Thursday night, and my mom just texted me asking if I could help her move some furniture on Sunday. Just like that. No, how have you been? No, I miss you. No acknowledgement of the 6 months of silence between us. Just, can you help me move furniture? I stared at that text for 20 minutes without responding. The blue light from my phone kept illuminating my face in the dark living room, and I could see my reflection in the black TV screen, tired eyes, a small frown I didn't even know I was making. This is how it always works. This is the pattern I finally understand. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Growing up, my family was loud, not in a fun way, in a chaotic, everyone needs something right now way. My parents divorced when I was 11, and my older brother Marcus became the golden child almost overnight. He was 17, good-looking, charming, the kind of person who could talk his way out of anything. My younger sister Elena was the baby, the one who needed protecting. And me, I was the practical one, the reliable one. The one who somehow ended up being responsible for holding everything together. My mom worked as a nurse, long shifts at the hospital. My dad lived 40 minutes away with his new girlfriend. Marcus had friends and parties and eventually college. Elena had school dramas and social struggles. And I had responsibility. By 16, I was cooking most of our dinners, helping Elena with homework, listening to my mom cry about money and my dad's broken promises. It didn't feel like a burden then. It felt like love, the way I expressed it, the way I knew how. I moved into my own apartment at 24. It was a small one-bedroom place with creaky floors and a temperamental AC unit, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's safety net. I worked as a content manager for a tech startup, made decent money, had friends I actually enjoyed spending time with. My life was quiet in a way that felt like healing. That's when my family needed me the most. My dad got sick, heart problems, stress-related complications from his third divorce. My mom couldn't afford to take extra time off work, and Elena, by then 22, was dealing with her own mental health crisis. Marcus was living in California, successful and distant, available for phone calls but not much else. So I went home. I helped my dad through his recovery, drove him to appointments, sat with him through the scary nights when he thought he was dying again. I moved back in with my mom to help with bills when her insurance didn't cover everything. I became Elena's therapist, listening to her fears about relationships, work, her future. I did this for 3 years. 3 years of putting my own life on pause, of turning down promotions because I couldn't commit the hours, of cancelling plans with friends, of being needed so completely that I forgot what it felt like to need anything myself. And then one day, they didn't need me anymore. My dad stabilized. My mom got a better job with better pay. Elena moved in with her boyfriend and seemed happy. Marcus called once and mentioned that he was thinking about flying in, which he never actually did. And I was left standing in my childhood home, the place I grew up, the place that raised me, feeling like a ghost. I moved back to my apartment. No one asked me how I was doing. No one thanked me. It was just accepted that I was gone again, that I was fine, that I would always be fine, because that's what I did. I was fine. I made other people's lives manageable and never asked for anything in return. The worst part, I believed I was okay with that. I told myself it was just how family worked, that love meant sacrifice, that I was stronger than my siblings for being able to carry more. I was so good at lying to myself that I almost believed it. 2 years passed quietly. I got promoted at work. I bought nicer furniture. I went to therapy for a different reason, anxiety about my job, some old childhood trauma stuff, but I never talked about my family. That wasn't the problem, I thought. That was just life. Then one Tuesday morning, I met someone at the coffee shop downstairs from my office. I was standing in line, exhausted, thinking about a presentation I had to give, when the older woman behind me tapped my shoulder. She was probably in her 60s, with grey hair and these kind eyes behind red glasses. "Excuse me," she said. "I couldn't help but notice you looked like you were about to cry into your coffee order." I laughed, that automatic laugh that means you're embarrassed and don't know what else to do. Is it that obvious? "I've been there," she said simply. "The pretending I'm fine while I'm definitely not fine look. I used to have it permanently tattooed on my face." We ended up talking for 20 minutes. Her name was Patricia. She was a retired teacher. She told me about her own kids, how she'd spent decades putting their needs first, how she'd forgotten who she was in the process. She didn't give me advice, she just listened. And then, when we were about to leave, she wrote her number on a napkin. "Call me sometime if you want to talk to someone who understands," she said. "No obligation, just, you seem like you need a friend right now." I put that napkin in my purse and forgot about it. Honestly, I dismissed it as a kind gesture from a stranger, the type of thing that happens once and then becomes irrelevant. Patricia was sweet, but I didn't need help. I was fine. Stronger than fine, actually. I met Patricia 3 more times over the next month, always by accident at that same coffee shop. We started exchanging numbers. She invited me to lunch. We became friends, the kind of friends where you talk about real things, where you're not performing a version of yourself. She never pushed, never asked too many questions. She just was there. Steady, consistent, interested in my actual life. That's the thing about being the responsible one in a family like mine. You become invisible in a specific way. You're seen when you're useful. You're noticed when something needs doing. But you're not really seen for who you are, what you need, what you're carrying. My family realized this around my 30th birthday. My mom called, actually called, not texted, asking if I could help with a situation. Apparently Alina was getting married, and the wedding was in 6 months, and could I help plan it since I was good at organizing things? My dad called a few days later with a different problem. His new girlfriend's daughter was looking for a job, and could I help her update her resume? Marcus texted something about needing a recommendation for a friend who worked in tech. Could I talk to someone in my network? I said yes to all of it. Of course I did, it was what I did. But this time, something felt different. This time I noticed that no one asked about my life. No one asked if I was dating anyone, if I was happy at work, if I had dreams I was pursuing. They just asked for favors. They assumed I had space in my life for their needs because I always had before. I helped Alina plan her wedding. I sourced caterers and venues and got her a dress that made her look beautiful. She got married and looked happy, and at her reception she thanked everyone who made today special without specifically mentioning me, even though I'd basically done the entire thing. I rewrote her boyfriend's sister's resume. The woman got a job she was wildly unqualified for, which later became a whole thing I won't get into. I made a call to someone I worked with, someone I had a professional relationship with, and vouched for Marcus's friend. The friend was charming but incompetent, and eventually got someone else fired for something he did. I never found out the full story, but I felt responsible And the whole time my family came and went from my life like I was a service they used. They called when they needed something. They disappeared when they didn't. I would have been fine with this, probably. I would have accepted it as the way things were, as the price of being the reliable one, except something shifted. I got sick. It wasn't serious, a stomach bug that turned into something slightly worse, the kind of thing that makes you feel like you're dying but actually isn't dangerous. I was home for a week, unable to work, barely able to eat. I texted my mom that I wasn't feeling well. She responded with "Oh no, feel better soon," and never followed up. I didn't hear from my dad. I didn't hear from Alina or Marcus. No one called, no one checked in. No one brought me soup. Patricia came over. She brought soup. She sat with me while I felt terrible, and she didn't even act like it was a big deal. She just did it because that's what you do when someone you care about is suffering. When I recovered, something in me broke open, not dramatically, quietly, the way things actually break when you've been holding them together for too long. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't have a big emotional conversation where I told my family how I felt. I just stopped. I didn't answer calls as quickly. I made excuses when people asked for favors. I started living my own life like it mattered. For about 8 months it was almost peaceful. I went on dates. I took a trip to Costa Rica. I spent weekends with Patricia and other friends. I started a passion project, writing, something I'd always loved but never had time for. My family noticed, not that I'd changed but that I wasn't as available. My mom made a comment about how I was distant now. Marcus said I seemed different, but they didn't ask what was wrong. They just adjusted and started spreading their needs around to other people, which made it easier somehow. I wasn't special to them. I was replaceable. That should have made it hurt less. Instead, it made it hurt more. Then I found out the truth. My dad mentioned something on a phone call, just casually, like it wasn't important. He said he was proud of me for finally not being so codependent anymore. He said he and my mom had actually discussed it, at some point, about how I was too reliant on helping people, and how they were trying to encourage me to be more independent. I remember standing in my apartment with the phone pressed to my ear, completely still, like if I moved I would shatter. "You discussed how to make me less dependent on being needed," I asked slowly. "Yeah, we thought it was unhealthy," he said. "We wanted you to have your own life." I asked him when this discussion happened. Turns out it was about 5 years ago. Right after I'd spent 3 years taking care of him, my parents had a conversation about how I was too invested in being their caretaker. They decided to gently distance themselves to help me, so they just stopped calling, stopped needing me, stopped treating me like I mattered. Except that's not what it felt like from my perspective. From my perspective, it felt like abandonment. It felt like the moment I stopped being useful, I stopped being valued. I got off the phone and sat in the dark for a long time. The next day I did something I never do. I called my mom and asked to meet her for coffee. Not a favor meeting, a real meeting. She seemed confused but said yes. We sat at a cafe downtown, and I asked her why she never asked me how I was doing. Not in an accusatory way, genuinely curious, like I was trying to understand a puzzle I'd been carrying for years. She looked uncomfortable. She said she didn't want to intrude on my privacy and that she'd always respected my independence. But it wasn't that. I could see it in her face. It was that she didn't think to ask. When I wasn't solving her problems, she didn't think about me. I was a supporting character in her story, useful only when she needed something. She didn't mean to be cruel about it. That's what made it worse. It wasn't even personal, it was just how things were. I asked her if she knew that I went to therapy, if she knew about my anxiety, if she knew I'd been lonely, if she knew that I'd been struggling. She shook her head. She actually shook her head like the answer should have been obvious. Of course she didn't know. I hadn't told her, and she didn't ask. The dark secret, if I'm being honest, isn't one big thing. It's 1,000 small things. It's the realization that the love I thought I was giving, the sacrifice, the responsibility, the endless availability, wasn't actually what my family needed. It was just what benefited them. They took it and made it normal, made it feel like that was all I was capable of, all I was worth. The secret is that I'd spent my entire life training my family to use me, and they trained themselves not to see me as a person. I collapsed about 2 weeks after that conversation with my mom, not physically, emotionally. Mentally, I stopped leaving my apartment. I called in sick to work. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just lay in bed and thought about every favor, every late night, every time I'd put someone else's needs before my own, and I felt this crushing weight of regret. Not regret that I'd helped them. Regret that I'd taught them they could only need me for one thing. Regret that I'd never insisted on being seen as a whole person. Regret that I'd made myself small enough to fit into the space they'd created for me. Patricia came over when I didn't answer texts for 3 days. She didn't ask what happened, she just came. She sat with me in the dark of my apartment, and she told me about her own kids, about how it had taken her decades to realize she wasn't responsible for their happiness, their success, their lives. She told me about the guilt of setting boundaries, about the fear of being abandoned when you finally started asking to matter. The thing about being the responsible one, she said, is that you think love means being infinitely available. But real love, the kind from people who actually see you, that requires them to care about your boundaries as much as you care about theirs. I cried for the first time in years, not quiet tears, actual messy chest-heaving sobs, and Patricia sat there and she didn't try to fix it, she just let me feel what I was feeling. I took 3 weeks off work. My boss was worried I was having a breakdown, and honestly I was, but it was the kind of breakdown that needed to happen. I spent time with Patricia. I did actual therapy, real therapy, where I told my therapist about my family and what had happened. I started writing about it, journaling really, just trying to make sense of the story I'd been living without realizing I was living it. And slowly something shifted. It's hard to describe. It's like I'd been wearing a jacket made of my family's expectations for so long that I'd forgotten what my actual body felt like underneath. As I took it off piece by piece, I started to remember who I was, not the reliable one, not the caretaker, just Anna, a person with her own life, her own needs, her own worth that didn't depend on what she could do for other people. The turning point came from something so small that Patricia probably doesn't even remember it. We were having lunch, this was maybe 3 weeks into my breakdown, and I was telling her about something stupid that happened at work. Some guy in a meeting had said something condescending, and I just accepted it without pushing back because that's what I do. Patricia stopped eating and just looked at me. "Anna," she said, "do you remember that day we met at the coffee shop, when I gave you my number?" I nodded. "You know what I did when I went home that day?" she said. "I called my daughter and told her that I'd met someone who looked like they needed help, and I'd done the only thing I knew how to do. I offered kindness without expecting anything in return. And my daughter said, 'Mom, you know that's beautiful, but you can't save everyone.' And I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to save people. My kids, my husband, my parents, my friends, and no one ever asked if I needed saving." She reached across the table and took my hand. "But here's the thing," she continued. "The kindness I gave you that day wasn't heroic. It was just a person noticing another person suffering and sitting with them. That's it. That's what real love is. Not the big sacrifices, not the endless availability. Just one person noticing another person and saying, 'You matter.'" I understood then why that moment had mattered so much. It wasn't just that Patricia had been kind to me, though she had been. It was that she'd been kind without expecting anything in return. She didn't help me so I would owe her. She didn't offer friendship so I would be her project. She just did it because I mattered. My family had never done that. They'd only ever treated me like I mattered when they needed something. I went back to work after 3 weeks. I went back to my life, but I was different. I was quieter, more intentional, more aware of the space I was taking up and the boundaries I needed to maintain. My mom called one day in the middle of summer. There was something in her voice, something urgent and kind of panicked. She said she needed to talk to me about something. Could I come home this weekend? I said no, not in a mean way, just firmly. I said I had plans, and unless someone was dying, I would see her next month at a scheduled time that worked for me. She seemed shocked, actually shocked, like she couldn't believe I had the audacity to have my own plans that didn't involve her. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. And I realized that's what was going to happen now. She was going to start worrying that something was wrong because I was no longer infinitely available. That was the cost of setting boundaries. The people who benefited from your lack of them would start wondering why you weren't serving anymore. "Everything is fine, Mom," I said. "I'm just building a life that belongs to me." I didn't tell her about my therapy. I didn't explain the breakdown or the journey or Patricia or any of it. I wasn't trying to hurt her or make a point. I just wasn't going to perform healing for her benefit anymore. We hung up and I felt lighter. The revenge part, and maybe this won't feel like revenge to anyone else, but it felt like justice to me, was simply living well without them. It was building a life so full and rich and real that my family became peripheral to it. It was going to Thailand. It was taking myself on dates. It was writing and sharing my writing with people who cared about my voice. It was building genuine friendships based on reciprocal care and mutual respect. It was becoming someone my family no longer recognized, and it was wonderful. But then there was the twist, the thing I didn't expect. My dad had another health scare, not as serious as before, but serious enough. My mom called and asked if I could come home, and I almost said no. I was so ready to say no, so committed to my new boundaries, so determined to show them that I wasn't just the reliable one anymore. But then I thought about who I wanted to be, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but out of actual choice. I went home for a weekend. I sat with my dad. I didn't magically fix things with him, we're not in a Hallmark movie, but I was present, I was kind. And it wasn't because I was trying to earn his love or prove my value. It was because he was sick and I could help and I chose to. The difference was everything. He noticed. He said something like, "I know I haven't been the best dad to you. I know I took you for granted." And I said, "Yeah, you did. But I'm here now because I want to be, not because I have to be." It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. It was something more honest. It was me being a separate person with my own boundaries, choosing to show up anyway. Here's what I didn't see coming. My family started treating me differently once I stopped being available. My mom actually called sometimes just to talk, not to ask for favors, to ask how I was doing. It took her realizing she might lose me to start treating me like I mattered. Elena came to visit and actually listened to me for the first time in years. She asked about my job, my relationships, my dreams. She said she'd always felt bad that I'd sacrificed so much, and she'd wanted to give me space, but she realized that wasn't the same as actually caring about my life. Marcus still lives in California, still doesn't call much. Some people don't change, but I stopped expecting him to, and that took away a lot of anger. My dad and I still have issues, but there's something healthier about our relationship now. He sees me as a person rather than a resource. It took him nearly dying twice and me becoming completely unavailable for that to happen, but at least it happened. The ending is the quietest part of all of this. It's me at home on a Thursday night, and my mom texting to ask if I can help her move furniture on Sunday. And this time, instead of saying yes automatically, I consider it. I think about my week, I think about what I need, and then I text back. I can help for a few hours in the morning, but I have plans in the afternoon. Does that work? She says yes, she thanks me. She asks if I want to grab lunch while I'm there. It's not magic. It's not a beautiful redemption where everyone realizes they were wrong and they love me perfectly now. It's just a small adjustment, me having boundaries, my family slowly learning to respect them, everyone becoming slightly more real to each other. Patricia invited me to meet her for coffee next week. My therapist said I'm making good progress. I'm working on a story collection about family. I'm dating someone kind, someone who asks me how I am and actually listens to the answer. I'm building a life that feels like mine. Sometimes I still feel the old patterns trying to pull me back. I'll get a text asking for a favor, and my first instinct is to say yes. But now I pause, I ask myself if I want to, and more often than not I do something radical. I take into account what I need. I'm not the invisible one anymore. I'm Anna. I'm 32 years old. I'm complicated and flawed and learning how to take up space in my own life. I'm showing people what I'm worth by insisting on it, not by proving it through endless sacrifice. And you know what the twist really is? The thing that changed everything about how I see my whole story. The person I needed saving by wasn't my family. It was me. And the person who saved me wasn't someone I owed a debt to for the rest of my life. It was just someone who saw me and cared. It was Patricia, showing me what real love looked like. The kind without strings, without keeping score, without expecting infinite availability in return. Real love lets you have boundaries. Real love lets you be seen as a whole person. Real love, the kind I'm learning to give myself and to expect from others, make you invisible. It brings you home to yourself. And that's where I finally learned I belonged.